Welcome to the Freedom Blueprint Show, a podcast about creating the lifestyle you want through your small business. Drawing on their experiences starting and running multi-million-dollar small businesses, three friends, Jon, Ryan, and Gabe, discuss how to have a business, but more importantly, a lifestyle you love.
What up, guys?
Howdy.
Jon, where are you today? You're in the beach or something, no?
Yeah, I'm in Clearwater Beach. I don't know if we can see it with the way the light is or whatever, but yeah, so that's the ocean there. It's pretty like gnarly
Nice.
right now. Yeah, but yeah, it's been cool. I mean, it's always been kind of like a dream to just like live on a place overlooking the wide ocean view kind of thing. So
That's a beautiful view. Ryan,
yeah,
too. I mean,
cool.
You're in the beach, Ryan's in the mountains.
Yeah, man, we're living the dream right now.
I'm telling you, man. I gotta learn from you guys. You guys are doing something right.
Really interested to see, Jon, when you get married, where you end up landing. Like, if you marry a wife that will just move around with you and as freely as you do, make sure that if that's important to you, make sure that you go through that on that checklist.
It is important to me, and I've been thinking about that since I've been down here a lot. Like, I really like my unconventional life. Like, I really enjoy what I get to do, and I want that to continue. I don't want that to stop just because I get married or have kids or whatever. So that's going to be kind of one of my many non-negotiables is
For sure.
you know, I want them to, like, I'll probably do 6 months and 6 months. Like, I'll probably do 6 months by my family in the DC area, like when it's warm, and in the cold months, the beach or live abroad or live on a sailboat or something. Just do cool, different shit. Probably only could have one kid, to pull that off, just so at least you have like two people to kind of split up the responsibilities, and you have to probably like do some homeschooling and stuff. So I don't know for sure how that worked, but I think that's kind of the plan. I kind of figured that out while I was down here.
Seems like you've thought about it a lot.
Yeah. Can I give you some advice on that?
Yeah. I mean, I'd love advice and critique.
Well, I don't know. It's just some advice. So draw a target instead of making a list. Draw a target with bigger circles. And in the center circle, put your like absolute 100% non-negotiable. Like she has to be a girl or whatever, right? That's not a non-negotiable for you, but your absolute non-negotiables, right? And then just as those circles go further away, like put the things that are important, and less important. And at least you like, it's really hard because what I find most people do is they try to, in their mind, they make a list of every non-negotiable, which really, if you ranked them, it's like, well, this is really more important than that.
Yep.
At some point, you're going to have to sacrifice on something.
I think that's smart, man. I think that's really smart. And that's another thing I've been thinking about is obviously there's no perfect person, and so you're going to have to trade off some things. You're just going to have to. And I like that. I like that target framework. I think you're right.
All right. Sorry. Moving on. What are we talking about today, Gabe?
We're talking about how to create a team that thinks like owners.
It's a good one. Whose topic was this?
I think it was mine.
Okay, it's a good topic. I feel like Ryan. Let's see. I feel like Ryan maybe is the most intentional about this, though. I think Gabe, you're pretty good about it too. So, Ryan, what do you do with this? How do you try to do this?
I'm happy to share, but Gabe, I'm really excited to hear about yours. I don't know as much about your team as I probably should and how you have that structured. And you have a business partner too, so it throws another dynamic in there, right?
Yeah.
But I think this is probably, as far as those like target circles goes, this might be in my middle circle, my most important circle of the things I've done to be able to scale and grow. Right? There's a lot of things I do, like I have to increase my capacity and all that stuff we've talked about, but really getting others to think like owners and to own what they do. And the only way I was able to do that is to get myself out of the business. That year I traveled 123 days was the year that really changed in my life because it forced people to make decisions without me.
I love it. So you went through it. Oh, what I love about that though is that some people try and figure out like how to do it, but they don't have there's not like a mechanism in place to force them to figure it out, if that makes sense, right? Like for you decided you committed on this 120-day travel thing. And so that in and of itself was a cool hack because there was no other option. Like you basically burned your ship, and this is like, if this is going to work, this is the only way it's going to work while I'm gone. So I think that's super cool, because it just really forced you for it to happen.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's the way. Now, the next question is, well, how do you keep it going once you're back, right? Do you just go back into your old ways? And I've forced myself to say, you could figure it out. You could figure it out, or I empower you to figure it out. I use those words intentionally with people. And like, that's almost my way of telling them, I'm too busy. I don't want to think about this. You go figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And I mean, did you feel well prepared, Ryan, to do all that traveling? Or were you not sure how it was going to play out?
I had hired a new COO, and I had confidence in him. And one of the people was new. A couple of the people were new, but some of the people had been with me long enough where they were kind of more in a manager role. So I knew I could trust them, right? Like, I mean, you don't want to have a brand new team and then just go leave, right? There's all that training and onboarding, and you got to kind of work people into that progress. But to a certain extent, it's kind of sink or swim, and people are smart. Like they say, it's funny. I was going to say this on the other episode we did the other day, and I forgot to bring it up. They say some of the smartest people in the world are the people that the decisions they make on a daily basis are whether they live or die. And there's still people in like Africa that are like that, right? Like if they don't do certain things on a daily basis, they may die. And these are the kind of people that like find the plant that like they push in the water and it causes the fish to just come up. Like they get really, really creative when your life's against the wall, right? When it's sink or swim, like you start to get creative. And putting your employees in those situations, I would prefer that you do it while you're still around in case the whole ship does catch on fire. Don't just like leave and say, I don't have access to my cell phone for a month. Figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, that goes back to the same thing that I just noticed in the beginning is there's a hack, there's a mechanism that actually forces the change to take place, where in that case it's like life or death, right? But it's forcing you to take some type of action, which is interesting. It's inspiring me to actually think about maybe perhaps just taking completely 2 weeks off with no phone whatsoever, just to stress test the team and the business to see what happens,
Absolutely.
Yeah. What was the, like, when you first started the traveling, Ryan, how did you start it? How many days were you gone? And like, were you still available and like, doing stuff by phone?
Yeah. I mean, I'm mostly available when I'm traveling. I wasn't attending the weekly meetings. I tried to attend the weekly meetings just to kind of get a pulse on what people are doing. I mean, you really have to, it comes down to accountability, right? And you have to have someone in your organization that's good at holding people accountable, which isn't me anyways, right? When I try to do that, it's not my personality. I don't like it. I get more frustrated with people when I have to hold them accountable. So I want people to think like owners, and they don't naturally do it, but I just find myself thinking, well, why aren't they doing it this way? Which isn't appropriate, but I just fall into that trap. And, showing up at that weekly meeting and just checking to see if they got their to-dos done and what they got done for the week, it kind of gives me that confidence of, okay, I could trust them. They're actually getting crap done.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you were pretty good about attending the weekly meetings even while you were traveling?
I tried. I wasn't always good about it. At a minimum, I would check in with my COO and say, hey, how are people doing?
Yeah.
Are they getting their to-dos done? Are you holding them accountable? Are they, taking action, implementing what you talked about? And it's really having that. So here's a good point. It's hard for people to take ownership unless you give them structure and hold them accountable. And then they learn to do it. So those are kind of the steps for them to get there.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I find too, just, I try to treat, and I've talked about this in other episodes, but I try to treat the people that work for me, like adults for the most part, and try to not like, micromanage people, not treat them more like children where they have like a lot of stuff dictated to them, like the hours they need to start and stop and how to structure their day and stuff like that. So I try to give them as much like autonomy, and flexibility and like freedom, because those are like core, I think, like human values that just make somebody enjoy whatever they're doing more. When they feel like they can have more say in it, they're going to feel like they have more ownership, of it. It can go too far, where you don't have like enough accountability and you're not really sure what they're doing or if they're really getting much done at all, so it can kind of go, you have to find, I think, a middle ground. But yeah, I try to kind of err that way to help them at least feel more like it's their own little like small business to some extent, as much as I can.
So it's interesting. I'm reading a book right now. It's all about that. It's a tough read. It's called Humanocracy. But it's pretty cool. I mean, they have some pretty wild case studies there we're talking about companies with millions of employees that are run with maybe 10 to 20 managers. I mean, it is pretty fucking impressive. And like they don't have org charts or any of that. But one of the things that they do, which it's kind of so we have a monthly strategic meeting that we do in our business, and that's honestly one of the topics that I'm going to bring about with Omer, is to think about that more, is to think about like, how do we extract the genius out of the team, and how do we get them to drive their own decisions. And like, one of the things I'm learning from the book, and it's very humbling, but is that like, as leaders, we're probably, and this is probably counterintuitive and counter to everything that you've been taught, but as leaders, we're probably the worst people to drive strategy, because we're not in the front lines. We're not seeing everything that's happening. And so one of the things that the book like helps you to do is to come up with ways to have the team drive the strategy instead, and so that's something that I'm like really looking forward to learning about and stuff like that now. And I think, to answer some of your guys' questions as far as how you drive it, I think if you want your team to think like owners, you have to treat them like owners. And what does that mean? And I think giving them some type of ownership in the company through some form, whether, equity is a little bit complicated, but you can give them, a profit share. You can, there's different mechanisms that you can do it, where now they're bought in, and they're understanding the risks, and they're understanding that, okay, well, if us as a team doesn't do X, Y, Z, there's consequences, and we suffer from that. And so they're starting to look out for each other. They're thinking, as a group, instead of just me and, what do I stand to make or gain or lose from this thing, So
it's interesting you say that, Gabe. I'm in the middle of that right now, because I bought these two competitors. And it's really funny. I knew I was buying both of them, but neither one of them knew I was buying each other. And I would hang out with both of them just in different scenarios, whether it was at lunch or just interviewing them. And inevitably, the other competitor would come up and they would talk trash about them. And it was really awkward for me, because I'm like, you guys are going to be brother and sister here pretty soon, And I'm trying to get them to come together and think and work together. And the way we did that is, they had never been shown any kind of financial data about their departments ever from either owner. Either owner hid that from them. And I had a meeting of both of them in the room, and I said, here's how profitable one company was. Here's how profitable the other company was. Here are the list of things and major projects that we think could get us to this X profitability. And I said, if we hit this number, you guys get $10,000 bonuses and a trip to Hawaii. If we hit this other number, you get $5,000 bonuses and a trip to Hawaii. But for what that's going to take is you guys working together and owning it, which is one of our core values, is own it.
Ownership. Yeah.
Yeah. And take ownership. Now, the things that I need to do as a leader is not necessarily, and I believe I should create a vision for them and what that looks like and help them on the journey and hold their hand. But really, I have to empower them. And that's the biggest thing that I think you could do as a business owner with your people, is empower them. And they just yesterday, I jumped on an alignment call with one of the girls. I wanted to kind of hear how she was doing. And my CEO was doing an alignment call with her. And she was asking questions like, well, I want to make these major steps to get to this goal, but can I do that? Am I allowed to do that? And she asked the right questions, like, can you guys please empower me so I can go do this?
Right.
And I love that she asked that, but most of your employees won't ask. They're going to be lazy, and they're just going to do whatever their tasks are instead of being empowered to take control.
Yeah, I think culture plays a huge
I
role
like that.
too, because if if you have a culture where people are scared to make mistakes and they get, heavily reprimanded for doing so, then they're just like, that's it. They get disengaged. They're like, well, fuck this. Then I'm just going to do it Ryan's way. And I don't want to get bitched at, I don't want the hammer to come down on me. So I'm just going to do it this way and keep my head down and do my job. And now that's like the worst thing that can happen in your business, because now you get a disengaged employee,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I like that the bonus thing, and Ryan, are you going to give them transparency into the financials? Like, how often are you planning to do it to see show them how they're tracking?
Yeah, during I think quarterly, we'll probably go through it. Maybe even monthly. We're trying to figure that out right now. We have a consultant coming in to I've never done this merge process before, so he's going to help us to find some of that. With that being said, I'm a believer that each department head should own one or many line items on the financial statements. Like, you own this line item.
Yeah.
You're making sure that works, and then showing the bigger picture of how that line item affects the bigger picture.
Did you have any concerns? Because I could see a lot of business owners like listening to this having concerns about showing their employees how much money the company's making, aka how much money they're making. Did you have any concerns there, or did you get any like blowback there?
I have zero concerns about that. I think a lot of people do, and I just think it. And it's probably because of the way I think. When the company makes $5 million, I don't think of it like my money. I really don't. Like, my wife and I live on 15 grand a month, which we gave ourselves a raise this last year. It was 10 grand a month. And that's all we spend. Like, our whole life revolves. And I know it's a lot of money, right? But our whole life revolves around 15 grand a month. I might make $2 or $3 million this year, but it's like, in my mind, they're two totally separate entities, like not even connected.
Yeah. Well, and you just can't pull the 2 million out, right? Like, a lot of people don't understand that. I remember I was watching an interview with Buffett, and one of the announcers was like, you have, well, I forgot what the number was, but you have like 6 billion in cash. How does that feel? And he was laughing. He's like, I don't have 6 billion. He's like, Berkshire does, and I remember listening to that. And I'm like, man, that's like, for him, like, he probably is thinking in his mind, like, a lot of people don't understand how business work,
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. That's cool. I mean, I really like that idea of giving them that transparency, tying their bonuses, for their bonuses to what the company does. We did something similar last year. We did a profit share as well, like a certain percentage of the net profit that we made for the people on the team. And then we were thinking about probably doing it again this year as well, like for 2020. So, but yeah, I like it as well. Like, Ryan, like giving them that opportunity early as well, putting it on the table. Hey, this is what is possible, as a motivating factor. And then I like the line item ownership too. I mean, that's like what big companies do, right? Like, when you're like a GM or a president or whatever, like one of the big indicators of like how big of a job you have is like, do you have like your own sort of like budget and your own like line items and stuff that you're like owning, and sometimes your own even like mini P&L, within division that you're responsible for. And those people really are like into little mini CEOs within a big company.
100%.
Cool.
And that's my goal as I expand into other markets. And I think wholesalers and investors listening to this that expand into other markets, like, if you are not tracking in your QuickBooks classes by location, you're doing it wrong. Like, you should be able to pull a P&L and know how much money you're making in Oklahoma versus versus Florida versus Washington, D.C. Like, you got to track your P&L separately. You have to. And then you can create mini managers over those P&Ls.
You're saying geographic P&Ls if you have business operations in different places?
Or even, I do it by location. Yes. So The answer is that's how I do it. So we're here in Phoenix, Tucson, and Vegas right now. Well, Phoenix and Tucson are close to each other, but they're totally different P&Ls from my perspective. And The old owner of this business tracked it all in one major thing. And so they were in San Diego, and I'm sitting with the guy in San Diego that was our photographer there at lunch. And he says, we did 200 orders, last year or whatever it was. I don't know, 2,000 orders last year. And it kind of hit me. And I was like, how much do you get paid? He's like, 45,000. let's do the math on that. How much do you think we make per order? $150. Okay, let's add that up. It looks like we lost 20 grand. like nobody, and that was just simple math for me, right? But like the owner wasn't tracking it. And like my first thing I did when I bought the company is I pulled out of San Diego. Like, you guys have been losing money there for a year or two. Like, this is just stupid. You've been there for 2 years and you're not making money. So it's really, really important to track that. I think we're off topic. I apologize, but
no, but I think that's where, if you want to create a company of owners, like, you need transparency. And so, you know, you don't need to be a genius or anything by any stretch of the means. But if your team can see the numbers, someone in your team is going to raise their hand and say, hey, you know, we're losing money in this market. Like, why are we still here? Like, it doesn't, you know, and there's no rocket science behind that. But if you don't lead with that transparency where people can look at things and like raise their hand and ask a simple question that maybe you haven't even thought about or even looked at because you've been too busy or whatever, it can change the game for you.
I was just going to say, I was going to kind of switch topics a little bit. So maybe if you have something, maybe jump in after this. I was going to ask you guys how you feel about flexible work hours as a policy. Like, people come in and leave kind of when they want. It's a little harder when you have like more of a real business, like Ryan, you do, when they're coming to an office. It's easier when it's virtual, you know what I mean? But just, yeah, curious what your guys' thoughts are on that as a tactic to give people a feeling of more ownership.
I think it works for salaried employees if you see them putting more than 40 hours a week in consistently. I don't feel great about it for frontline employees.
You think they would kind of be maybe more apt to take advantage of it a little bit?
Yeah, when I say salaried, like more manager type people, salaried managers, but like the frontline people, you know, that 13 to 20 bucks an hour.
Yeah.
You know, those type of people are just, and I was like this. I remember when I hate admitting this, but I was just out of my first job, and I was kind of my big break into a hard money lender, and I was single and just kind of living the life. And my priority, I was like, it used to be 20 work, 80 life. And now it's probably 50-50 work life, right? I still, like, my priority was like fun and life and girls, right? And I mean, I remember like closing my door and like taking a nap sometimes and just like taking advantage of like, it's 5:10. I think I've stayed late enough. I should go. Like, I wasn't mature enough to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I'm pretty, I guess, progressive on that end. Like, I hired a new TC the other day, and she, like, I have a shirt on for this show, but I'm typically without a shirt most of the days, and I run my morning huddles without my shirt because I like to get sun in the morning, and I'm doing my thing. And she's like, she hops on a call, and she's like, you know, it's like, you have a beautiful background, because I'm like in the pool area hanging out. And one of the things I told her, I'm like, well, you know, I'm like, for me, like, it can't feel like work, because if it feels like work, then it sucks, you know? And I don't know, she really liked that, but I would feel like a hypocrite if I lead my life in a certain way and I don't extend that same thing to other people. So I let my team decide when they want to take off and when they want to be on. I tell them, look, I said, I don't want a phone call from you asking me if you can leave the office to go to handle something. Like, if you need to handle something, just handle it. Don't bother me for that. Yeah, we don't have a vacation policy. Just take off whenever the hell you want. There's no clock in, clock out. Just get your work done. And what I find is that if you have the right culture and you have the right people who care about their job, they're not going to leave you hanging, you know, and I think that's where cross training also becomes highly important. So if you have a company of owners, they will work with each other to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to be out from, you know, the next 5 hours. Can you fill in and cover me on this, or back me up on this, or whatever? And the work gets done. You know, is it perfect? No. Are there downsides to it? Sure. But there's also upsides to it, you know? I don't know. I just, I don't want to live a life where we're micromanaging people or a company that way. So I just run it that way, and it's worked for us, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that was another question I was going to ask you guys about too, is like, we kind of formally announced, you know, unlimited paid vacation. But, you know, the stipulation there is that, just like Gabe was talking about, you have to, if you leave, you have to make arrangements to have your stuff covered by somebody else, and you guys can just kind of like trade off. Like you scratch my back while I'm gone, I'll scratch your back while, we'll just scratch each other's backs as we take vacation. So again, sort of as like an empowerment and ownership, kind of thing for them, where like just kind of the way I take vacation too. It's like I can take as much as I want, but like I have to just make sure my stuff is getting done somehow. And so trying to see if they are able to do it kind of the same way. So like even my, assistant, who I want to make sure she's taking enough time off, because sometimes she doesn't take enough. We're working with another assistant who's based in another country, and she's kind of training him, and a lot of the stuff she does is kind of a backup so that she can feel better about like, taking more time off and like her stuff still getting covered. And that's happening, and that she's taking more ownership of that because of that opportunity, and desire, to take advantage of that, I think, to some extent. So
yeah. And I find in my experience, I haven't had people like that are trying to at least yet, we have a very small team, and there's good synergy between us, but I haven't found like anyone trying to like maliciously take advantage of it. As a matter of fact, I find that more people tend to be more cautious about it, because they're like, okay, well, now that I have the freedom and flexibility to take as much time off as I want, I don't want to let the team down, and I don't, and I still want to make sure I hit my goals. And that's one of the things that I find when it comes to ownership as well. If you can, like, there's a whole lot of books out there like on systems and how to create processes and metrics and all this stuff. And honestly, the more I mature in business, the more I find that that's a more top-down approach. And it's just not as effective, man. Like if you let your team create the system, whatever system they feel is best to work in, they tend to perform better, and if they tend to choose their own goals, obviously as a business owner, you want to push them and make sure that they're stretching themselves, but they need to own their goals. They need to own the processes that they use to work with. Like whenever I've set the process and I've set the goals, like it's not the same. And then, when you're bringing on new employees or anyone, it's like one of the most important things I think is to be as clear as night and day as possible as to like, hey, like, here's what's expected of you, and like here's how I know you're knocking it out of the park. And like, so as an example, like I just hired this transaction coordinator, and I was like, and I could tell already she's taking ownership, because she called me and she's like, hey, I saw the offer letter, and she's like, I just want to understand these 3 things because you put that these were the benchmarks for my performance. And I'm like, all right, sure. She's like, I'm glad you're asking me, because that means like you actually care about what I wrote.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, okay, so I see you put here that, step 1 is that I need to reduce the closing cycle by 20%. So she's like, what's the closing cycle today? And then, what is 20% less? So I told her the numbers, and I told her why I thought she could lower it. And I just told her, I don't know where that number came from. I just sounded good. So I'm like, but I think you can do it. And she's like, yeah. And when I showed it to her, she's like, I can definitely do it. And then the other thing was like reduce my time involved in closings to no more than 15 to 20 minutes a week. And she's like, well, what do you spend your time on now? And like, what are you doing? And then how can I take that off your plate? So she went through this whole exercise for her to understand how to achieve the goal. And without me like telling her how to do it, like she took complete ownership for it. And now she knows what she has to do. And I think that's also critical. Like that's one thing I've learned like in leadership is just learning to be more clear about the vision of like, hey, I'm paying you for this. This is what I would love for it to happen. This is how I know this is an amazing relationship, you and I, and you figure out the details,
Yeah.
Can I state that another way?
Sure.
The vocabulary words we use in my organization are, let's decide the outcomes together, but I want you to define the behaviors to get to those outcomes.
Right.
So what behaviors do you need to do? I need to call 2 hours a day. I need to do outbound calling. I need to go knock 100 doors. Whatever. You help you define the outcomes. And
you
that's
define the outcomes or the behaviors.
The behaviors. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you give me an example of that, Ryan, in your businesses, like what that looks like?
Yeah. So, we want to average $50,000 per flip. Well, to do that, the outcome for the sales department is we need to be buying deeper, right? So one of the behaviors is I'm going to attend Sandler training twice a week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
That's
you give them
that they're going to do, that they've chosen to do, to be able to buy deeper.
okay, and you give them the freedom to choose the strategy or the behaviors that are going to get them to that outcome.
Yeah, but then we track it. So a question I ask in my daily huddles, and not everything you have to do on a daily huddle, but a question I like to ask my people is, and they kind of looked at me funny when I first started asking them this, but are you winning or losing today? And they need to be able to keep score to know if they're winning or losing. I think that's the most frustrating thing as an employee is, am I doing a good job or not?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I try to, I ask, like, hey, are the outcomes, are the behaviors that you're putting in place affecting the outcomes in the way that you wanted? If not, change the behavior.
Correct. And what we do for that is like, we just track the outcome, so we just track the end goal, and then every day they just report if they're progressing toward it or not. And in our one-on-ones, if they get to a point where, okay, if they're on track, there's really nothing else to really talk about. But if they're off track, then it's like, okay, well, what are you doing, and what's not working, and what's working, and what do you need to stop doing, and what do you need to change, and what habits do you need to do? And you let them kind of figure that out. Because you hear the saying sometimes, like, just track the behaviors only and the goals will take care of themselves. But I don't know, man. Like, I find it way too micromanaging to track someone's behaviors. I'd rather just track the outcome and just make sure they're progressing toward it, and then like Ryan said, let them figure out the behaviors.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's tough to track behaviors, especially like in sales roles. Like we hired a number of new like inside sales relationship builders where their job is to cultivate relationships with like realtors and other investors in the market to bring us deals for us to sell to our investor list. And so there's a lot of just cold outreach, especially at first, to like screen through people who might be a good fit for us and establish those relationships. And like you're saying, Gabe, I think if you were to dictate like number of calls that they need to make, for example, like per week, and then track that, I feel like that's like a really quick way for somebody, to feel like burned out and like just not enjoy what they're doing, as opposed to like we're talking about, I tell them the outcome is, I want 2 to 3 deals a month, within the first couple months basically out of this. And you can call realtors, you can call investors. I'm going to pull lists of new realtors that you can call probate attorneys, and you give them different avenues.
So I'll give you a perfect example of that. So my guy, Paul, right, who I put him in contact with your girl, I forgot her name. Kayla, right? So here comes the business guy or the leader, like trying to like drive decisions, right? Which again, I think is, as the more I learn, I feel like it's not the best approach. And I'm telling Paul, like, all right, I got 3 friends in different markets that are doing this. This is what you have to do. Like, just text these agents, like get on them, send X amount of texts a day, follow up. Don't waste your time with time wasters, and just, move. And he's like, yeah. And I feel like he's not getting it. So then I put him in contact with your girl. I'm like, you know what? Let me find someone who's doing it, because maybe he'll listen to them versus not. And, he comes back and he's like, bro, like this was amazing. And I'm like, well, what's amazing about it? And he's like, they're doing this and that. And I'm like, but that's the same shit I told you, 2 weeks ago. He's like, I know, but I got it differently now. And I'm like, okay. But long story short, he's still not fucking doing that. Like, he's doing his own thing. And I would have never in a million years told him to do, like, encourage any of those activities, but he's fucking knocking it out of the park. Like, he's having an awesome quarter. He's surpassing his goals. And like, he figured his own way of driving his own revenue in, which I would have never like told him to do that or supported that. But I just gave him the goal. I'm like, look, man, you got to bring in 100 a quarter for this shit to make sense. Like, you bring in the 100, we're great. If you can't bring in the 100, this shit's not going to work, and he's fucking doing great. And none of it with my, with my direction or my ideas on his own,
That's powerful. Yeah, that's powerful. Cool. Well, cool. Yeah, I think this was some good stuff here on team empowerment and making them feel more like owners. So yeah, it's probably a good place to wrap, I think.
Cool.
Thanks, everybody.
Enjoy the ski trip and the beach.
All right, guys. Thanks.
All right, guys. Later.
Yeah.